podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to How Are the Podcast. And before we start building up to the game against Aston Villa on Sunday, where it's probably worth mentioning that it's possible we close the gap to a Champions League place to just 3 points, which I thought was worth raising to get an early feel-good factor into the proceedings. But before all our focus is directed at Villa Park, we thought we'd have a quick news roundup to chat all things Sunderland related that has gone on in the last week to get us up to speed ahead of the weekend. And luckily for me, I have a few gentlemen that will help me do just that. And first up, we have Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. Morning, mate. Are you keeping well?
Yes, I am, mate. I am. And even better, listening to you and Martin just do a really quick Q&A, of course. You know, you just nip on. We'll do a quick 20 minutes, an hour and a half later, and you've answered all people's questions, plus, well, any questions the world has as well, I think.
I'm not taking responsibility for that. I just get asked the questions, you know. But yeah, hopefully today we can be a little bit more precise. We'll see. Well,
it's always good listening to you, Martin, putting the wills to right, as always. But also joining us today, we have the ever-punctual Bomber. Hello, mate.
The ever-punctual Bomber. Hello, Chris.
Yes.
Right. Hello, everybody.
Only the 5 minutes late this morning, mate. You know,
yeah, that's. I mean, if you're less than 5 minutes late, then it classes as on time. It's fine.
Are you going to have that conversation with Roy Keane, are you?
Yeah. It's fine.
But just quickly, mate, International Fans Weekend, you were up. Did you enjoy it?
I was. Yeah, it was very good. Got a bit of everything in, really. Me and Malk and Tom Albrighton played a bit of golf. Got to watch the boxing. Got to watch the football. Got to watch a 1-0 win. Got to see all the fine gentlemen, well, most of the fine gentlemen, from Roker Report for the annual catch-up in the Fans Museum. Got dragged into the Rabbit for the 4th year in a row. Yeah, I mean, what more do you want from your weekend?
Dragged in. I bet you were leading the conga through the doorway.
Absolutely was not.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, we'll get into that probably outside of the podcast. But and last but not least, we have Ant Waterson. Hello, Ant.
Hello. I don't think anyone ever gets dragged into the Rabbit, man. It's a cracking pub. I've seen pictures, Bomb. I've seen pictures of you dancing, mate. So I think you had a good time.
Yeah, a bit of Lucky Dreams on, mate.
Yeah, that's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah.
When he got to the bar, they said, "Oh, the usual is it, sir? Don't pretend."
Yeah, well, you know, if standing there belting out the lyrics while holding both arms up with one drink in your hand can be classed as dancing, then yeah, there was lots of lads dancing.
I've seen worse things classed as dancing, Chris. Trust.
That's very true. You haven't seen my moves for a while, mate. So you know. People picked up a few injuries last time, so we'll leave that one there. But anyway, let's get into some news roundup stuff because let's start with International Fans Day quickly, and I'll start with you, Andrew, because listening to Gav's pod, you know, talking to people, and you know, you were talking to people around the Fans Museum and stuff. I mean, Gav emphasised it, but it is so important that the club do stuff like this to encourage people from all around and, you know, builds up that fan base from all over the world. And it is just incredible. You do forget because Sunderland's such a, you know, when you go away sometimes you do think, gosh, Sunderland's just a village in some ways where, you know such and such, or you're always not that far removed from someone else when someone mentions a name. But we've got people all over the world coming to Sunderland to kind of soak up that atmosphere, isn't it?
It's staggering, and I think the point was made on the pod that it reminds you that this is a amazing, crazy, bizarre, magical club we all support, and it's got brilliant pull. But it is important that these people are made to feel special and made to feel welcome, because it must be very difficult. Bomber, yourself, you might know this. It must be very difficult. You see a Sunderland result and you're buzzing. Well, if there's nobody there to talk to about it, you feel kind of left out a little bit. So I think it's nice that the club say, "Hey, listen, you're as much a part of us as everybody else."
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, Chris. To be Andy, to be fair, and I'm only, well, I say only. It takes longer for me to get to the stadium I like than it does some of our fans from Ireland. But being in country is bad enough. Down in Gloucester, I don't know any other Sunderland fans in Gloucestershire, and the only way I've been able to enthuse about the club and express my love for the club and talk about the trials and tribulations and the good things is through this medium, and through the friends that I've made throughout it. So yeah, like before then, been doing this now, what, 5 years I think I've been involved with Roker Report, and before that, my engagement with other fans was Twitter, basically. So yeah, it is a great thing to bring like-minded fans who are probably isolated in their support of Sunderland together. And again, some of the stories that you get every year are fantastic, and how people, I thought my story was quite a good one of how I support Sunderland, but it pales in comparison to some of the other lads who are in Mexico and the States and Canada and Australia and everything else. It's it's pretty impressive.
And I imagine if it took the train from where you are, Bomber, it'll probably take longer from people to get from Canada to Sunderland than it would getting the train in this country.
And more expensive as well.
Yeah. Well, there was one guy, I think, I'm sure it was the first guy that Gav talked to at the Fans Museum, and Gav was like, "Oh, so what you up to while you're over?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm a big fan of trains, so I'm like, I'm going to go around, looking at trains throughout the country." I'm like, bloody hell. Well, just make sure you turn up 15 minutes later to catch it, because there's no rush in this country. But anyway, let's get into some small bits and pieces, because there's some more meaty ones to get into. But we'll go through some of the quick ones that have come up in the news. And I'll start with you, because there was a strange one with Sam Allardyce on the Libero pod, and I've only getting these comments third hand, so I'm not quite sure who was on, but I know Jonathan Wilson quite often is one of the hosts of this podcast. We've talked to him about it the last time he was on Howie the podcast. But Sam Allardyce made some comments on there about turning it around at Sunderland. And he said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said something turned around when he signed 3 Muslims in a teetotal German. So suggesting that it was one of the reasons where it turned around maybe a drinking culture at the club at the point. But with everything that had gone on before, it's not really a surprise, is it, Anne?
No, not really. No, I mean, obviously that's the first time I heard those comments when we were talking about this off air, and it sounds like a really bad joke, doesn't it? Like a dad joke. But like I say, it must coincide with, obviously, because when we did sign, obviously, Kirchhoff, who did have a bad debut, but then when he came on against Man City, he looked absolutely unreal, and it did turn around our fortune signing all those players, didn't it? Because we ended up staying up. So it was obviously a good thing, and maybe it was, something that had been going on in the club for a little while. I mean, it was not too far away from Poirier calling it a toxic culture at the club, wasn't it? And I think there was certain players picked out of that. So maybe signing them did turn it around a little bit. I don't know. I just think with those comments, I'm just surprised that in this day and age, you kind of have to see those kind of things. It is what it is, isn't it? But no, I mean, he was right. It changed it. Like I say, it changed the whole season around for us. And like I say, those players, Kone, Wabi Kazri, all had massive parts in us staying up that year. So yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and then maybe David Moyes introduced it again. Who knows?
Well, yes. Well, he dropped one of them, didn't he? He dropped Kazri. He didn't like him, did he? And obviously, he's still our best footballer that we had at the club. Never mind.
Yeah. His bi-British comments, maybe because he thought there was a lack of drinking culture. Who knows what happened? But anyway, yeah, that was just a quick one. But moving on, and I'll come round to you, Bomber, with this one, because and it's been a couple of weeks now, but it's kind of gone under the radar a little bit. But Jermaine Defoe getting appointed manager of Woking, and I think he's got off to a good start. 4 games unbeaten. I think in his first game he came from 3-1 down against Eastleigh, who unfortunately had Sunderland links. in the last decade or so. Let's just leave it there. But yeah, since then he's done well. I think the won 5-0, if I remember rightly. I think, or 5-1. Sorry, they beat Morecambe. And he seems to be doing well. And they've got Gateshead next, to the most informed team in the country. But an interesting one that he's gone all the way down to Woking to start off his career. And there is this argument that some people think, well, that's what they should do. They should go down and cut their cloth. Like you look at Alex Ferguson, where he started off and he had to build his way up. And there's been many managers who have done that. Or you just go the Pep way and go straight in at the top and stay at the top. But to be fair to him, there's a lot of players out there who would get their qualifications and just say, I'm not starting somewhere like Woking. And yeah, he's gone in there and he's got off to a good start.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly been worse new manager bounces, isn't there, with managers coming into new clubs. And fair play to him because, like as you said, Chris, Premier League players, and especially Premier League players of the calibre of the likes of Jermaine Defoe, and I'm thinking, the people who go into management and that top level of Premier League. So your Frank Lampards and the likes, that it can often feel like anything below the Championship is beneath them. So fair play to Jermaine Defoe for checking his ego to one side and seizing an opportunity to go into the lower leagues. I think it's the way that you should do it, because especially if you've not played, for every professional footballer has played a non-league in some form, whether it's youth football or whatever. But to go into the non-league, into a team like Woking, who are, for all intents and purposes, middling around in the National League, to cut your teeth in management. Some might say, he's sold himself short and dropped himself a little bit too far down. But he's decided to take on that challenge and looks like he's doing all right. I think I just read some of that he's got Paul Bracewell in with him as well, so there's some the links there. And yeah, I mean, if he keeps doing what he's doing, I think he's undefeated, isn't it? We were talking about it's 4 draws and a win or something like that. And ironically, it looks like he's got the defence locking doors as a striker, because there's two 0-0 draws in that and a 5-1 at Morecambe, Eastleigh result aside. So yeah, he's doing all right. I think it looks like they'll not kind of go up or go down this season. So it's kind of stabilised them almost into that mid-table obscurity, I guess. I haven't seen the league table to see. They're sat 10th at the minute, and obviously with the National League playoffs, probably you get down to 14th and you'll get a playoff place. So I don't know whether they're still in with a shout of that, but yeah, it's a good start and fair play to him, and obviously wish him all the best.
Yeah, just quickly sticking with you, Bomber, very quickly, just on that Paul Bracewell one, because we did a podcast with him before the Everton game this season, and it was great to talk to him and talk about his time at Sunderland. But he also said that he was looking to get back in the game at that point. He had a few irons in the fire that he potentially had at that point. So it's great to see him as his assistant. And if you think, it wouldn't have just been because, of course, he was assistant manager under Avocat while Defoe was a Sunderland player, and Allardyce. I can't remember who originally appointed him as assistant, but I'm sure Andrew might tell us in a minute. But I'm sure he was definitely assistant under those two. He was also on the staff at Spurs when Defoe was kind of doing his qualifications and doing some stuff with Spurs with the academy and stuff like that. So it's good to see that they had a relationship, and yeah, that he's back in the game at Woking with Defoe.
Yeah, it's a strange one though, isn't it? Like you don't expect so much those relationships between players and backroom staff. Maybe players and managers, but players and coaches and backroom staff, and that you don't automatically link those together. But obviously during that time, Spurs and Sunderland, they've built a relationship up, and yeah, it's good to see Paul getting an opportunity to get back into the game, as he was desperate to do when you spoke to him.
Yeah, that's it. Well, moving on, well, we're sticking with Spurs slightly, and maybe the weekend in the game, because I'll come to you, Andrew, with this, because you might have been waiting for this one. I'm not quite sure, but Kelvin McKenzie, who always talks about the truth, of course, as we well know, with his history, but he made comments about spare change being stolen from the Spurs fans on the way into the Stadium of Light and not given back without their permission. And who knows where that change would have gone, because the clubs say it goes to charity, but who knows, does it go to charity? No conspiracy theories there, but seemingly Mackenzie had his tinfoil hat on there, Andrew.
Yeah, can we not talk about Paul Bracewell a bit more? I mean, I'd rather,
You can start there if you want.
No, I think it was. Was Allardyce that made him assistant manager. Now that would be a story if it was Kelvin Mackenzie that he was making assistant manager.
So was he? But I thought he was assistant under Advocat.
He'd come in as a coach. He'd worked with the youths on like a one-to-one basis and then worked his way up. And I think he was a coach under Advocat because he brought his own fella in.
That's interesting.
I'm prepared to be told otherwise. Like I'm not 100%.
Well, one thing you can be guaranteed of is me and Andrew are going to be frantically looking this up as soon as this pod.
It's ironic that I'm about to criticise Kelvin Mackenzie for not knowing what he's talking about. But you said it there about the truth. Now, I don't know if I'm maybe being a bit insensitive here, but his comments were on the anniversary of Hillsborough. And you just think, how have you not learned to get your facts right before making wild accusations that could cause division and anger? He was so desperate to have a pop at Sunderland that he failed to take a cursory 2-second glance to find that every single Spurs fan was made aware beforehand. This isn't some sort of surprise. This has been a policy at Sunderland since, was it Coventry or Portsmouth or...
Coventry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think something happened with the Pompey fans, but until Coventry did it again, then we put those restrictions in place. If my memory's right.
Right. Well, but there you go. We're talking a period of years here then, aren't we? So this has been a thing. And it just, I don't know, it's a bit sly to just kind of not say it in as many words, but kind of like just intimate that Sunderland have done something inappropriate with the money. And it's all a bit, it's just unpleasant. And as a guy, I've got no respect for him whatsoever. He seems as if he lives his life to just stir the pot. But certain things I think are dangerous, and you shouldn't use them as a avenue to have a pop. And as well, in general, it seems as if Sunderland now we're back in the big time are starting to. There's been a few people having digs. I noticed Liam Kennedy, who was a Newcastle journalist who quite rightly got booted off the Sunderland Echo. He'd made some comments years ago, then got a job for the Echo, then cried when he got found out. He's been making little nibbles at Sunderland, and I just think journalists have got a responsibility. Why deliberately antagonize people and say things that are untrue? It's not right.
Yeah, well, like I said, he hasn't got form for this, has he? But yeah, anyway. But actually, one thing I was going to mention about that was it is strange that these restrictions have been in all season. Not one other club has mentioned anything about it, but it just had that. It had that feel about it, that game with the Spurs fans, and I think he was just kind of stoking the flames with it because I think everyone's shackles were already up about that game. But again, moving on from those comments, Ant, I want to move on to you because it's not news over the last week, but I don't think it's been talked about a huge amount, or maybe not enough, because we go back to the 7th of April, and there was an announcement that Bay Collective were to acquire a majority stake in Sunderland AFC Women, and there was a announcement that was put out on the website. And it had a lot of information about Bay Collective, being a multi-club ownership platform dedicated to building women's football clubs. That, of course, with the slogans, they say they win on the pitch and thrive off it and all that sort of stuff, as companies generally do. But yeah, there was lots of comments, and from the chief executive of Bay Collective, Kay Cossington, said we couldn't be more excited to partner with Sunderland AFC and write the next chapter for Sunderland women, a club with such a proud history and strong identity and all of this. But it does seem, just reading between the lines, you might know a bit more about it, Ant, but it does seem like it's a majority stake, but the club have got enough that they keep the Sunderland identity, and that remains, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's what's really, really important about it. Obviously, we mentioned this on the Lasses podcast last Monday. It seems, everybody said, "Oh, it was April the 7th." I was only last week, but we podcast like 3 times a day, don't we? So it's a world away in our lifetime. But yeah, I think that's the most important thing about it is, you've got to remember the women have, brought footballers like Beth Mead, Lucy Bronn, Steph Houghton. These are, huge names who've gone on to have wonderful careers in the game, started their career at Sunderland. And it's also right to have that identity that what we do, we build youth. We've got a couple of really good young lasses in there. Katie Watson, for a start, who's, for me, going to be a WSL player in the making the next couple of years. She's already made 100 appearances for Sunderland and she's 20. It's just absolutely, incredible. So the fact that they're keeping that, to build the youth and everything like that, and then hopefully one day see them develop, but hopefully see them develop as a WSL player at Sunderland, which is what we want. We don't want these to go off. We had a couple of years ago called Neve Herron, who's a Sunderland fan who's had to go to Birmingham, and she's obviously going to get promoted this year, so she's going to be playing WSL. So we'd like to see that. We'd like to see Sunderland up there as well. I think with the whole thing about it is the fact we're getting Kate Cossington, the fact that Kate Cossington's going to have a big say in what's going on. For people who don't know who Kate Cossington is, she was basically FA director when England won the Euros. So she had a lot to do with that behind the scenes. So it's not as if we've sold it to an American company who don't know anything about the women's game. It's literally they've got someone in who lives and breathes women's football in England. So I think it's a really, really good, really exciting kind of time for the lasses next year. The only little thing I've got is how it had to come to this. How Kivers obviously thought, we'll do that and not put the club's investment in. That's the only thing that's got me a little bit it's right. Well, obviously they don't really care that much. They've sold it on, but for the lasses themselves, it is hugely exciting. So it's great to see.
Okay, so just to kind of clarify that last point, Ant, would you say that there might be a little bit of that from the people involved in Sunderland AFC women's team and that club and the staff there, that there's a sense of that the club wants to hand them off a little bit and wants kind of less control over it? I mean, is there an element of that?
Maybe. Obviously, I don't know if it's just reading between the lines. It's not, what you see what happened with Chelsea. I think Aston Villa, who sold their women's teams to themselves for a PSR, basically to make some money for PSR. This isn't a PSR move at all. It's not making Sunderland men any money at all. So it is literally just a thing where we have sold the majority stake of the lasses to Bay Collective. So it's not like I say, it's not as if we're gaining anything PSR wise. So that's probably a good thing as far as the like I say, as far as the lasses are concerned, it's a massive, massive thing. Just for me as a fan of both, I would have liked the investment to have come from our owner as one club mentality thing. But that, like I say, as far as being a lasses fan, it is going to be very, very exciting next season because it is going to bring money. It's going to bring big names. They're going to come to the club, and like I say, they're still looking at keeping the identity of the club, so keeping these young players thriving and everything like that in Sunderland, which is what we need, and hopefully one day might lead to an extension of some stadium where we might be able to play football in Sunderland, because at the minute they're playing Appleton, which in all intents and purposes is a nice little stadium. The lasses love playing there, but it's on the far outskirts of Sunderland. Not many people can get there. It's difficult to get to. So, for something like maybe, to build a stadium in Sunderland would have been class for the lasses. Because if they get promoted, they'd have to play at the Stadium of Light every week, every time they're at home. So obviously that has its own kind of, troubles and everything like that. And obviously I don't like watching women's football in the stadium when there's not many people there, which at the minute it's still building. Apart from when we play Newcastle where we had 10,000 and everything like that. We play Crystal Palace next Sunday, I think, and it's at the stadium, and I think there'll be probably less than 1,000 there, maybe 2,000 if we're lucky. And I don't like watching it in like big stadiums like that. I prefer like the little small stadiums. So, but no, like I say, in total, it's an exciting thing for the lasses, and I think it'll give us that opportunity to get into WSL in a couple of years' time.
That's the last game of the season, a week on Sunday, I think.
Yeah, it's the last home game. Yeah. They've got Ipswich the week after. That's down at Ipswich. But yeah, it's the last home game. Yeah.
Andrew, you were just going to put your 2 pence in there with that.
I think Anne hits a nail on the head with Kay Cossington being involved. It's clear that this isn't somebody seeing it as a money-making scheme. It's somebody with a passion for the women's game. I think the Bay Collective have already had, this has obviously been happening in the background for a while, because didn't we have a player on loan who's now playing for Bay FC in America, Kira Barry?
Yeah. So she was at Manchester United, signed for us on loan, and then has got to BFC. But you look at Andrew with their season, we probably could have players from Bay coming until December, because their season doesn't start until January over there. So we may get Kira Barry back. That would be massively exciting if we could do a player trade. That would be really good for Sunderland, to be fair.
A genuine question. I'm not trying to catch anybody out here. I appreciate that little bit of concern about, are the men's ownership almost washing their hands of the women? I'd like to hope that what it is actually is, this is getting investment into the women's team without anybody having to then also fund the men. That's how I see it. I hope that it's a case of, by bringing these in as separate owners with an ownership purely of the women, they're not then having to like fund any men's projects or spending. Hopefully it's that, rather than just the club washing their hands. But is that me just being naive, Ant?
No, I think you're right. No, I think you're right, and I think maybe the proof will be in the proof will be in the pudding in a couple of years' time, if they're in the WSL and they're attracting some international players who can come and play for them, while also keeping the identity of, like I say, because we've got 3 or 4 really good young lasses. We've got a couple who are, we've got a lass who made a debut against Newcastle called Chloe Paxton, 19-year-old, did an ACL when she was 17, made a debut and 10,000 fans, you know what I mean? It was the first game for the club. Absolutely outstanding. And they've got some of them in the academy who are very, very good. Like who could make a step up, international players as well playing for the academy. So as long as they keep that and make sure that we don't kind of lose our identity, as in like what Newcastle women have done, who have just tried to buy themselves out the league, because they've got maybe one local player playing for them now regularly. They've got rid of half, the majority of them who've got them there, they've got rid of. So I don't want that to happen. I really don't. I think. Like I say, I think, obviously to get the WSL players will have to leave. It is what it is. But I still want that identity of bringing through the next Beth Mead, the next Lucy Bronze, the next, Steph Houghton, Jill Scott. I mean, the list goes on, Demi Stokes, the list on, it's endless. So I would like to still see that in the club. So fingers crossed. But, like having Kate Cossington doing this here after what she's done in England is massively, massively exciting.
Yep. Good stuff. Well, I think that's a good chance for us to take a quick break, and we'll be back very soon.
Blowing ad budget on metrics that look great till the CFO sees them? That's bull spend. And marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
I remember telling my boss, it'll be good for the brand, when leads were slow. Yeah, it wasn't.
Cut the bull spend. LinkedIn lets you target by company, job title, and more. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
And welcome back to How We're the podcast. And we're just about to get into some of the, I want to say kind of really recent news. It is, but it isn't this one, Bomber, because of course, the vote was going on regarding Legends Way for a good while. And then there was a strange announcement at the game where they just announced who had been voted onto Legends Way. And I can't actually remember off the top of my head if there was a closing time to the vote before that. There might have been one and I missed it. I wasn't quite sure about that. But the strange thing was an announcement at halftime which 14 players had been chosen, and we can get into the ins and outs of some of those if you like, Bomber. But it was really strange how it was done at the game, because then what happened was nothing was really published anywhere on this list. Somebody just announced it and had said it. Couldn't find this list anywhere, and then suddenly it pops up on Wednesday night on the website. And interestingly, I went on the website on Wednesday, and you could still vote on there. And then, as far as and I'm kind of 99% sure that was the case, because I went on and I was able to do things. I didn't actually submit anything, so I'm not sure whether it might have blocked me before I submitted anything. But I could get onto the screen, and then suddenly it gets published late on at night, and then you can't. And then the voting thing was turned off. But it's all just a bit weird, isn't it? And we can get into some of the players, which makes it even more weird that it just seems odd. And you can talk about recency bias with the likes of Peter Reid. Martin and Andrew did talk about the fact that were they actually on the list, or was it, you could add people onto the list and then could those votes rack up in the background without people realizing it? It's just all been done a little bit strange for something that started out so brilliantly, and everyone that went, this is fantastic, and people have shelled out good money for this in terms of buying those things to go, buying their own personal paving stones or whatever to go on Legends Way. It's all a bit strange, isn't it, Bomber?
It is, yeah, because something that has been synonymous with the club over the last couple of years is how good the fan engagement has been and how good we are at doing these sorts of things. So when it was announced, it was, and it still is, an absolutely brilliant idea to get to get another statue up there, to have them facing, having something called that's Legends Way, having the Welcome to Sunderland up there. As a concept, it's what all diehard Sunderland fans want. It's absolutely fantastic. But you're right, the way in which it's been publicized, the way in which it's been handled, and then the way it was then the results were announced, almost feels like they've announced it, they've opened the voting, and then no one's really bothered about it since. And then all of a sudden, 10 minutes before the Spurs game, someone's gone, oh shit, let's have a quick look and see what these votes are saying. And they've not bothered to, like you said, not bothered to close it down or anything like that. And I'm the same as you. I spent a long while looking for that list, knowing that we were going to talk about it today. Same as you, I've just found a random little article from yesterday afternoon.
It just popped up suddenly.
It just popped up, and it's not even a list. So to find the names, I have to read that whole article then tick them off. Like you'd expect some sort of bullet pointed list of these 14 that are coming in there. Now, if we're going to go into the players, let's get this out of the way early. There's 14 players there, and how Patrick Van Arnold isn't one of them is an absolute disgrace.
You should pay for one yourself and put that name on it there, Bummer.
Yeah, pay for one and put his name on it. But yeah, you could spend all day and speak to 50 different people and get 50 different answers about who that 14 should be. I don't think there's probably 10, 11 there that you'd say are pretty nailed on, and then you're just looking at maybe one or two others that people will have different opinions on. Like, all seriousness, I'm looking at that list, and from my point of view, as a Sunderland fan who started supporting Sunderland in the late 90s, I don't really see. I think that they're all befitting of a place there. I know some of the more, like I said, the locals, or some of the fans who've been supporting Sunderland a lot longer than I might have different opinions. But if you were to ask me to list, 14 club legends, that list would probably be there or thereabouts. But yeah, in terms of how it's handled, it just feels like they've announced it and then used that as a portal just to get people to pay 150 quid for a stone, really. because that's the bit that they're pushing. Is not necessarily the vote. The vote is almost like the bait to put people out there, and then pushing you. Go on, spend £150 on this stone to be next to Peter Reid's stone and Jermaine Defoe's stone and everything else. So yeah, given how well the club have done those sorts of things over the last couple of years, I would have expected something slightly more clean, I guess, in terms of its handling. But I mean, as long as it happens and it's as good as the concept, I think we'll all be happy and we'll forget that the voting was still open and how it was announced and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has got any opinions on the actual players. You probably have, Chris. But yeah.
Well, I'm gonna come on to Andrew next, because I know he did speak about it, because we had some questions in for the Q&A. But Andrew, now that, because you were asking the same question with Martin, you were like, well, this list was, announced, but nothing's been said, nothing's been published, and now it has. I think Bomber kind of touched on the main point, that a lot of people are spending a lot of money. And it seems to me, looking at the list, again, I've got my Kelvin McKenzie tinfoil hat on here, but that if people want players to put their paving stone next to, or to spend money to have their name next to, they've actually got a big scattergun approach where they've got people for the younger ones, a Jermaine Defoe there. Oh, I want my stone next to a Jermaine Defoe one. I want mine next to a Quinn one, Phillips. They've almost tried to cater for all generations, rather than looking at, but again, it comes down to a vote. But I'd have been surprised if it was a vote that it had this clear distinction between all these generations.
Yeah, Bomber used the word clean, and I know where he's coming from. It all just seems a little peculiar, and it was a list of 40-odd nominations, all of which were players other than Bob Murray. So if you're going to include non-playing figures, why weren't other non-playing figures on the shortlist? Peter Reid, as you say, appears to have been like kind of come along behind the scenes as one of these nominees, but there's no other managers. So it all just feels a little bit odd, and I have to be careful, because we don't know the full facts, but it say the club were to now do a launch event or a dinner marking these people who've been voted in. Well, it's going to be a lot more popular if Jermaine Defoe and Jill Scott and the more recent names are there than. Yeah. With respect, this isn't meaning to belittle them, a long distant relative of somebody whose involvement with the club was 100 years ago. So I wonder if the club are quite pleased that it's come out in this way. Bomber again is right. You could have asked 50 people their opinions and we would have all come back with different lists. But there's one or two names which didn't get through to this final cut, which I think most people are surprised at. And yeah, what was a brilliant idea has just ever so slightly been impacted by a few people just being puzzled. And the point there, yeah, when Martin and I spoke the day before, at the time of recording, nothing had been announced, which was peculiar. And I fully agree that the article now, it doesn't bullet point it. It's an article where you've got to read the whole text to actually work out who the 14 are, as if it's almost hiding in plain sight. But that article starts with a link to buying your stone, yeah, and it ends with a link to buying a personalized stone. Whereas, had it been me, I might have made more of a song and dance about, hey, these are the 14 people who've been elected by the fans. I might have made more of a song and dance about those names. It's almost as if the club are a little bit aware that it's going to cause ructions, perhaps.
Yes. And again, you're right. It is difficult because we're talking when we're talking about legends. It's a really tough conversation because everyone's criteria is different, and all these people who are chosen are fantastic people and fantastic ambassadors for Sunderland, and it's a great list on its own. It's just quite a little bit of an odd list in the context of what it is. The other thing that strikes us as well in the announcement is that, you know, it says manager Peter Reid earns his place after guiding Sunderland to a historic 100. No mention of Peter Reid comes onto the list, you know, because he wasn't on the list, or, you know, Pitt fans have demanded him on because, you know, he was an omission from the list, but so many votes came in, you know, that meant he had to be in or something. It's just the wording and everything, the phrasing's really strange.
It's strange. And I don't want to get too much into this, but Jermaine Defoe, for example, is included on the list, despite the fact that quite a lot of fans were unhappy with the way he left after his second spell. And yet Bobby Gurney, the club's record goal scorer, isn't on. So there's bound to be people thinking, well, that's a bit, don't know. I wouldn't have predicted that, you know. But yes, yeah.
And talking about actually, I've been to a couple of dues. You might have been to similar ones or the same ones, Andrew. But I've been to dues where people have gotten like distant relatives of James Allen have come and getting, you know, something on behalf of the club. And actually, that's really poignant when that happens. It's actually quite emotional, because it might be the 2 generations later or whatever, and that family is still getting recognition for what James Allen did by founding the club and all of that. So there is part of that. Just to bring you in on it, and because I want specifically, I mean, obviously, you can have your say about the whole thing, but with your coverage of the lasses, obviously Jill Scott's on there. Now, from my point of view, you know, I just feel like Jill Scott, if you had an equivalent on the other side, on like the men's side, you might say, well, you would have Jordan Henderson almost, because he played a few games and then went off and won European Cups and almost won World Cups and European Championships, captain of England and all that sort of stuff. So for me, that would be an equivalent. Would that be fair? And there's maybe more deserving players who played more games for the lasses.
Totally agree. No, I totally agree. I think that's a very, very fair assessment. And for me, you know, as much as I like Jill Scott, I think she's had a wonderful footballing career and paved a very successful career outside of football since she's retired, been absolutely brilliant. But she wouldn't be in my top 10, to be totally honest with you. And again, that's not being. I'm not speaking any. You know, like I say, I'm not. It's no disrespect at all to Scotty, because I met her a couple of times. She's a lovely, lovely person. But she wouldn't be anywhere near it for me, because there's so many players where you've seen them come through the door and done well. I mean, the first one.
Sorry, just quickly, Anne. But actually, you've mentioned how really good person Jill Scott is, and I imagine, and actually, I've never met her, but I haven't seen her on the TV. And what you've just said, she might be the first person to go, actually, there's more deserving people than me. I
think if you asked her, she would. Honestly, I think if anyone asked her in a cold-hearted day and just say, look, like, what do you think of it? She'd say, I'm very honoured, because she's a Sunderland fan, very, very honoured and everything like that. But there is people more deserving, you know, and I do think there is. I mean, I think what could have happened with that was when the list got announced fully, I think there was only 2 or 3. I can't remember. I know Steph Bannon was on there, but a big glaring miss for me is Kira Ramshaw. So, like, you know, just for a little bit of history, Kira Ramshaw was 16 when she signed for us. She's Sunderland last through and through, Sunderland fan, loves the club. 16-year-old, we were like, you know, in what the equivalent is to WSL. You know, won things, everything like that. And then Ellis Shaw decided he didn't want to fund any money at the lasses anymore. They got demoted 2 leagues, and everyone left. This is your Beth Meads, you know, you know, the Lucy Bronzes of this world. All the players pretty much left, bar Kira Ramshaw, who stayed and got offers from lots of clubs, you know, foreign clubs, everything like that. Could have had a very successful career. Could have been a Lioness. Probably should have been a Lioness, and decided to stay with Sunderland because she wanted to get the club back to where we belong. And her career is obviously had to be shortened due to injuries, which like she got injured. But she, for me, is you call like Luke Irons Mr. Sunderland. She, for me, is Miss Sunderland and always will be in my eyes. So for me, just to have her on the long list would have been it. I'd have her on there. If they're going to put, like I say, if they're going to put a women's, which I'm totally with, and I totally think it's a brilliant idea to have a lass on there. You've got even just a little bit of history or a little bit of like knowledge would say Key's got to be top of the list. Her or Steph Bannon should definitely be on there. And I think Jill Scott would agree. Like I say, I'm not saying anything bad about Jill Scott at all. Like I say, a wonderful person's had a wonderful football career. But it only started at Sunderland. She didn't do much at Sunderland. It was, further on her career where she made a name for herself. So it is what it is, like I say. But I think just a little bit, even if the club had went, look like we'll ask the fans of the lads, who do you want on there? And I think the vast majority of us would have went Kira Ramshaw. So that's just my opinion on it. Like, but Rob Bannon definitely, because Bannon obviously was the captain when we won everything, and she was a brilliant captain as well. So
I guess the thing we got to remember is that it is for the fans, but it is also primarily a consumer function. It's a sales function, isn't it? That's designed to bring in revenue for the club. So I think just coming back to what we said right at the start, it feels like those individuals have been chosen for their publicity and their popularity rather than genuinely their club legend status. Because as you said, Anne, like Jill, fantastic player, great person, Sunderland lass, but people know her primarily through what she did for England and what she did after Sunderland. But I think if you to ask 90% of people who aren't fans like of the women's club, but are possibly fans of the men's team. Sorry, not fans of the women's team, but fans of the men's team. To ask to name a female Sunderland footballer, I think probably 3/4 of them would come up with Jill Scott for that reason. So I think for commercial purposes, I think it may have been manufactured a little bit, because you're right. I think there's more long-standing, more appearances, more goals, more effect on the team. More players who've been able to achieve that than Jill has.
Yeah, I mean, you look at. I think it's a good point. We've made this thing about the International Fans Day at the weekend. I think if you go on there and they look at that Legends Way and see say for instance Key Ramshaw, they get on and they go about, well, I don't know who she is, but everyone will know who Jill Scott is. Not as much for a football at Sunderland, but the fact, like, obviously your England career, everything like that.
I'm a celebrity.
Made a huge impact. In public life. Yeah, with stuff like that. It's probably the same with the Jermaine Defoe thing, because I'm in agreement that I probably don't think Jermaine Defoe would be on there for me. But you look at what he did at the club with the Bradley Lowry Foundation, with everything like that, with what he's done since, you're probably going to think, for people who are visiting for the first time, go, yeah, he did a wonderful job with a young kid who had cancer. So you can kind of understand that. The Bob Merry thing as well. The Bob Merry, again, for me as a fan, I wouldn't have him there. I really wouldn't. But because I remember the good times with Bob Merry, but Christ, I remember the bad times when we were all dishing out the red cards at Roker Park. I can totally remember all that stuff. But you look at what what the stadium's there for, and you look at, like I say, a fan coming for the first time at this football club. We're gonna have that. We're gonna have fans who are gonna come to Sunderland now. We're gonna have fans from outside of Europe, outside of anywhere, who are gonna come and watch us. And you look at that, and think, well, Bob Murray's there because he was the one who built the stadium, basically. You think, well, that's fair enough. So I can understand that kind of that logic. But had they just went, this is who it's going to be, and not put this out to a fan vote, I don't think we're having this argument.
Yeah, but see, that point annoys me slightly. I'll bring you in on a minute, Andrew. That point annoys me slightly, because I think if the James Allens and the Charlie Buckins and the Jimmy Thorpes were there, and people come support Sunderland for far and don't necessarily know much about the history, it makes them have a look, and it makes them find out about these people and why they're legends. So that point, why people recognise them, I think, well, tough. If they're the legends, they should, and they support the club, and they maybe don't know that piece about the history. They see the name Jimmy Thorpe or whatever it is, James Allen, they find out about the history. Go on, Andrew.
Couldn't agree more on that point. That we've got a great history to be proud of, so let's remember it, let's celebrate it. I just wanted to quickly say Ant spoke really well about Kira Ramshaw, and I'm a bit annoyed with myself that when we first, Martin, myself and Kelvin recorded a pod about the shortlist, I don't know why I had like a mind blank and Kira's name didn't pop up. But just touching on something we spoke about before, the new investment that's come into the women's team, if they wanted a very quick win and to show that they're here to be part of the club and to drive the club forward, they could get a lot of fans on board by doing something to recognise Kira Ramshaw.
100%.
You know, I know she's still at the club in the background, or she was until very recently. But yeah, if you want to make a statement, she is definitely deserving of something, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, it could all turn out that this was in fact down to the votes by the people, because we've got plenty of examples of how that turns out really well when we put it out to the vote of the people, haven't we? Yes, exactly. That just to name but one. There's one elephant in the room there. But anyway, let's move on. Two things to put on people's radars out there as well in terms of voting, which, as we've said, goes so well. The vote for player of the season is open on the Sunderland website as well, young player and all of that sort of stuff. So people can have their vote on that. Also to put on people's radars as well is there's a searchable site now for the Wall of Fame. The bricks at the Stadium are light. If people can now go and have a look at where their brick is and who's on panels and all that sort of stuff. They can do lookups. And I haven't actually gone on, but people have made enough comments to know it's a brilliant thing, and well done for the people who set that up. But moving on to some links, and I'm going to start with you, Bomber, on this, because this one looks like it's got a little bit behind it. Miguel Delaney, who's reputable and has getting a few things right, has he's pushed the link between Brian Brobbey and Bayern Munich, and there's been no talk of value or anything like that. And of course, he's pushing to get into the Dutch squad this summer, which could then elevate his price tag even more. But this one, I kind of brushed it away to start with, but once I've seen where these links have come from, I'm kind of thinking this might have some truth to it.
Yeah, I think it's been reported from multiple sources now, and as you said, Chris, some reputable sources also to suggest that this might actually have legs. So the last I've seen of it is that the report that I've seen says that we're almost resigned to losing him, but we'll demand a record transfer fee. So I think what's our record incoming? It's not still Darren Bent, is it?
Good.
2024. Yeah. So it's not going to be an insignificant amount of money, especially considering we're going to want to turn a profit on him. And I think we paid 20 million for him in the summer. So I think it's going to be a double your money kind of deal if Bayern Munich seriously want him and we're willing to let him go. I'd want us to keep hold of him, but I think as this season's gone on, I've been a little bit more pragmatic in terms of, falling in love with players and not wanting them to leave, etc. But yeah, it does seem that this one has legs, and I don't think I would. If he did go, it would be disappointing. But I'd also be excited to see who we replace him with, because, like I said, if the suggestion is it's going to take a lot of money for Bayern Munich to prize him away from us, then what we do with that is quite exciting. Whether Brobbey, I was going to say whether he wants to go or not is another question. But I guess if someone like Bayern Munich comes along and says they're interested in you, you take notice. I guess there's another question as to whether he wants to play second fiddle to Harry Kane for another season or two. But he doesn't need to move to Bayern Munich to get into the national team, because he's already there. He'll be at the World Cup, I'm assuming.
Well, in fact, just quickly on that, Bomber, his form with Sunderland has pushed him back into the reckoning.
Well, exactly. And we know that there are no real loyalties in football. So, but if there were, then you could make that argument to say, well, it's the opportunity that we've given you that's got you back into the team and actually sending you to a World Cup. We might cash that in, that loyalty in enough to fend Bayern off. But I think like I said, there's a lot of sources reporting it. There's a couple of well thought of sources reporting it, so there must be legs in it. I think it will just come down to whether Bayern Munich are prepared to pay what we would want to receive for him, and whether or not Brobbey wants to force a move or not. But yeah, if it is one that happens, it'll be disappointing, but also exciting to see what we do with that money. I'd be much more disappointed if one of the centre midfielders were to go, or one of our centre backs were to go.
Yeah. And with 6 goals in 25 appearances, but he brings so much more to the table than just goals. But just to build on some of Bomber's comments there, Ant, talking about the potential fee there, and we'll come on to the Robin Roofs links with Chelsea as well. That was something, the reported fees were something around 60 million or something like that, but he did poo-poo it over the last week or so. He did say it might not be the right time and all that. Maybe just saying the right things. Who knows what the future holds in the summer. But I think one of the overriding points that Bomber touched on, and it'd be good to get your input on Brobbey and Roofs, but for me, I think, and we've got to look at it this way because we're a developing club, like Brighton were a few years ago, or still are really. But if we buy a player for 20 and sell them for 80, it's an opportunity, because no doubt we've got a short list of a number of players in the 20 to 30 million bracket, maybe pushing up as we get into our second season, maybe going up to 40 million, who knows. But in that bracket where we sell someone for 80, we buy someone for 20 or 30, and they slot in. But we seem like we're prepared for that. And it's interesting because I think I've mentioned this before, but the way we work now, if you watch the Arsenal documentary on Prime, and I think the Spurs documentary on Prime, they cover the January transfer window. And it's really interesting because the sporting directors at both clubs during the January transfer window both say, God, I hate this transfer window. I absolutely hate it. And I'm thinking, it's your job, right, to recruit players and get rid of players. You've got 2 opportunities in a year and you hate one of them. I mean, it just sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it seems like the way we're run, that every player who leaves, they don't look at it as oh no, we've lost one of our best players. The club look at it as an opportunity, right? We've taken in an investment of 80, we spend 20 or 30, and okay, some of them might not work out perfectly, but at our level, we've got to accept that we can't hold on to these players unless, we create this atmosphere where players just absolutely love it and think the grass isn't always greener. But then, talking about greener, they might get double, triple what they're paid at Sunderland, which is going to be huge money that is going to see them set for life. So you can't really blame them. But yeah, there's a lot going into these links, isn't there, Ant?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Just, I totally agree with what Bomber said about Brobbey. I think it's, I think that just has to show how well we've done as a club this season, that Bayern Munich are looking at a Sunderland player. I've got to be honest. Like the amount of players they could have, and they've looked at Brian Brobbey and thought, this is someone that we need. And it just goes to show as well how well he's done as well. That he's been outstanding. But I think kind of in just me being kind of pragmatic, if Bayern Munich want Brian Brobbey, they'll get him. It's simple as, you know what I mean? They're a huge club. I think we need to do right by him and right by us by saying we're not going to accept stupid money, even because he'll want to. He'll want to go. He'll look at that and think, this is me. Don't, like you said before, it's me set for life here. I can go on. At one point, Harry Kane will leave, and I'll be number one here, and could win everything that there is to win. So that's fair enough. But again, for me, it just goes to show as well how how well we can manage that. Look what we're doing. The day after we got promoted into this league, we sold Joe Bellingham. That way he's our best player was sat and the other. But look who we brought in. We brought, like Diarra, Sadiki, who've been outstanding. Been absolutely brilliant this season. Like look on Sunday, Diarra and Sadiki were outstanding for us. And it gives us that kind of they'll know who they want to sign in this transfer window, in the January transfer window, and I would say arguably in a year's time. They'll have lists, they'll have like players on the doors and everything like that. And it just for me now, because of how successful it has been in the last couple of years, I'm kind of in the same kind of ilk as Bomber where I don't attach myself to these players as much now. I love Brian Brobbey the bits, I do. He's Sunderland play, wears the badge, this and the other, but I don't think that like it doesn't affect us as much now as what it did maybe 4 or 5 years ago when maybe not in League One, but when we were last in the Premier League, when we were selling, see Darren Bent, the Jordan Hendersons of this world, John Pickford's, it did affect us as much as now. It's like I know that we've got this network in place that we're going to get someone as good. The same with Roefs, and I don't think Roefs will go. I think Roefs will stay because I think if he's looking at, you've got to look at stability. If I'm a goalkeeper and looking at how stable we are as a club, how well he's done here, kept another clean sheet on Sunday, but how well he's loved there. Going to a Chelsea team that's more than likely going to have a new manager in next season, that may not be where they want to be. There's so many ins and outs at Chelsea. I think he's probably better off staying here for another year, and maybe he thinks that as well. That's why maybe he's put the kibosh on it a little bit. But no, listen, like in what 2 or 3 years' time, we'll be talking about this with a new sign that we've made probably next year. It's crazy, but I'm fully comfortable with it, mate. And I know Bomber's got his hand up, so we'll segue.
Yeah, I was just gonna didn't want to cut across you, Ant. But it's very much for us now. It's enjoy these players when they're here, love them when they're here, but don't hate on them or be too disappointed when they're gone. And I think as a fan base, we're slowly coming round to that, because we have been successful the last couple of seasons. We've kind of accepted that a bit more. When we were, struggling around in the Premiership, and Darren Bent was the only good thing about our team potentially in terms of being a talisman or the person that we all look to. And Jordan Pickford was, one of our own and the person that we all look to. We don't have that anymore. There's like 5, 6, 7 players who everybody loves. So there isn't that one player that we all cling to and pin our hopes on and pin our adoration for. So you could go through that team today from the Spurs game. You got Roefs, Xhaka, Sadiki, Luke O'Nien, Brobbey. Like there's so many players that we love now. So losing one of them, it doesn't have quite so big as an impact because we've got all these other players still here that we love and we love to support. And just very quickly, I'm glad that you brought up Joe Bellingham, and because that just epitomizes our strategy and how we should be trusting the club. Like if they decide that 40 million is a price for Brian Brobbey, buy and do it, and we decide to do it, to trust that we'll bring in somebody who is just as effective as Brian Brobbey. Because, like you said, the day after we got promoted, Joe Bellingham's out the door. We're all up in arms, saying, "Okay, we're one of our best players, one of our brightest prospects." And like you said, we've used that money and spent a bit more, but for all intents and purposes, we've used that money, brought in Sadiki and Diarra, let Joe Bellingham go, and he's struggled at Dortmund. So if he's struggling at Dortmund, it stands to reason that he probably would have struggled if we'd have tried to throw him into the Premier League also. Whereas we picked up 2 other players who've come in and done it seamlessly. So I think we just need to trust what the club are doing. I think I've said it a few times on a few podcasts. They've got more than enough money in the bank, so to speak, in terms of us trusting what they're doing.
Yeah. But Andrew, just to add to that list, we've gone through Brobbey to Bayern Munich. We've gone through Robin Roefs to Chelsea. The other one that's come out in the last few days has been Sadiki, who's been linked to Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, and bizarrely Spurs. So he might fancy a promotion battle next season. Who knows? But yeah, and again, all these links are coming out, and I think I remember this time last year, we were having week after week after week of pods just going, where's Bellingham going to end up? He's been linked to Man United. He's been linked to Dortmund. He's been linked here. And we were going, where's he? Do we want him to stay? But I think, and, Ant and Bomber have both kind of touched on it, that actually I think this is what the club relies on and is going to rely on. We're going to have to rely on players leaving, and the whole thing of the way that we have to do things is you look at the Bellingham transfer, like Bombers just said. Bellingham left for, what was it, 30 odd million, almost 40 million. We're bringing Sadiki for almost half that, who is arguably a better player. That's how you do business. So if you sell Brobbey for 80 million, you bring in a striker who fits your side that's that little bit better, hopefully, but for half the price. And again, at our level, that's how you've got to operate. And the club are almost banking on making a profit out of these players. So it's, we can't be too down if these players do leave.
Of course not. This is how it has to be. This is how a club can come from the Championship and break the mould and establish themselves in the Premier League. All the clubs that have done it recently, or relatively recently, so Brighton, Brentford, there's another club and I now can't think, but they do a similar thing about trade. Yes, Bournemouth. They do it by trading up. I fully take the points the lads have made about how it's important that we don't fall in love with players in the same way we used to. And we used to panic if a player went because it would be a case of like, oh, we've stumbled across a good player here. If they're sold, we can't replace them. But it's part of the design. And it's, if selling a player who's popular is the thing that keeps us going on this trajectory, we can all cope with that. It might be Sadiki, it might be Roefs. We don't know who it'll be, but the evidence is there that we'll cope. The club is stable and can afford to lose a player and it not be a death knell. And also, it's not just the players are being linked. I've already seen clubs are liking the look of Gusolfi. So it's going to be a tough summer and it's going to be worrying. We just need to keep our cool. And it's better than the alternative. It's much nicer having players who Bayern Munich. That's the headline when Brian Brobbey moves to Bayern Munich. Bloody hell, that's shocking that. But it's a lot better having players that are being linked with the top clubs than players we can't get rid of for love nor money. So we're just going to have to deal with it.
It was interesting when Bomber said trying to think of who our record sale is, and I was trying to think, actually there might be a record for us paying a player to leave. I'm sure there's probably that record out there somewhere. But Bomber, just very quickly, we are kind of pushed for time at the moment. A couple of things to get through, but there has been a link for an incoming player or a potential incoming player. Apparently, ourselves and Everton are looking at Abdul Fatawu from Leicester City, a winger that was linked back in the summer. That seems to have been revived. 22 years old, but Leicester are struggling, potentially going into League One. I'd be surprised. I think we've maybe moved up a level in terms of the players we're maybe tracking from last summer. So I'm not sure whether this is just a lazy one.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a toss-up as to whether it's a lazy bit of journalism and just someone's gone back and looked at who we were linked with in the summer and then gone back and looked at players that might be looking to leave their club. I mean, it stands to reason that he is only 22. It stands to reason that we've continued to have a look at him and think that there's a player there that, in a year or two could become a fully fledged Premier League player that's performing at the highest level. Like I said before, Chris, there's more than enough credit in the bank for the club if they decide that we do want to bring him in, that there's a talent there. You just look at what we've done. Well, like the likes of Talby, etc. I know Talby's a Moroccan international, but still, when he came in, nobody had really heard of him. And then we've got players like Jocelyn, who again no one's really heard of him. Angulo, no one's really heard of him and really rated him. That would be my only question. He's a winger a right winger predominantly, and we seem to have loaded ourselves up on wingers, albeit some of them are injured. So yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe if we lose one or two, but then if you think about it, we've still got Traore, we've got Talby, we've got Defoe who can play on either side. Rigg seems to be favoured out on that right hand side rather than a central role now. We've got Jocelyn, we've got who have I missed? Angulo. We've got one thing we're not short of at the minute is wingers, and we've still got Adingra to come back in as well if we can't ship him off on a permanent basis. So yeah, it's not one that I'm paying too much mind to at the moment. And I'll be honest, I don't really have an opinion on him as a player because I don't really know a lot about him other than he scored a decent return of goals for a wide player in a struggling Leicester team.
Yeah. Well, moving on, and the under-21s were in action in the Premier League Cup semi-final on Wednesday night against Blackburn Rovers. They won 4-2, and Andy put the players' ratings on the website. But you were there, weren't you, Andy?
I was. Andrew was there as well. I seen him on his way out, but he didn't hear us shout his name. Andrew! I was like, Alan Partridge.
He thought it was just one of his screaming fans.
It would have been, yeah. To be fair, he has got that. But I to be honest, I wasn't going to go like yesterday. But my cousin was like, "Oh, do you fancy it?" And it was at the stadium. I got on, and I was thoroughly entertained. It was the first half was definitely more exciting than the second half. We went 1-0 down in about 3 minutes. Poor defensive, well, for both goals, it was poor defensively. But when they started playing, it's only the second or third time I've watched them this year. And when they started playing, they have got to do play some nice stuff. I will say that they've got a couple of young ones who I think have got something about them. I do like Jack Whittaker. I think he's very good. I think he's very, very good. And everyone knows I'm a big fan of Fingargashian. I just can't pronounce his name properly. I thought he was okay. I thought the other Jones, is it Jaden Jones, Andrew, the other centre midfielder, number 4?
There's Jaden Jones in midfield. Yeah. Let's get this right. And Jensen Jones.
Jensen's the winger, isn't he? Like the full-back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You two were always trying to keep up with the Joneses.
We are.
Oh, excellent.
That's terrible.
I liked him. I like Jaden, and I liked young Whittaker. The rest, it's the first time I've seen Abdullahi. I wasn't too impressed with him. I don't think he's the Brian Brobbey replacement long term if we does go to Bayern Munich. But no, it was, like I say, it was a really, really entertaining game. I thought, like I said, the thoroughly deserved to get through. Ended up 4-2. It was like 3-2 after about 20 minutes or something. It was like a crazy start of the game. But it was a thoroughly entertaining game, and I think they play Burnley now in the final. So I don't know where it's going to be. I don't think it's been announced yet. But if it's at the stadium, I thoroughly recommend people to go along. It was an entertaining game.
Yeah, good stuff. And to see us out, the last one, Andrew, we've got another initiative from the club coming up. We've got Made in Sunderland Week coming up, and the club have done a few of these already this season. But just to read a little bit about the announcement, it said Sunderland FC is proud to announce the launch of its first ever Made in Sunderland Week. In partnership with the University of Sunderland, Made in Sunderland will be a week-long celebration of the stories, people, and businesses and culture that make our city great. Taking place for Monday, the 20th of April, under the lights at the Stadium of Light. The week will be highlighted when the Black Cats face Nottingham Forest on Friday, the 24th of April, following the success of club-wide initiatives, including Heroes Week and Founders Week. Made in Sunderland will place a spotlight on the city's identity, creativity, innovation, and pride, both on and off the pitch. So it says supporters can also look forward to a matchday experience designed to celebrate the city at every turn, with local voices, local talent, and local creativity woven throughout the occasion. So it sounds like the club are doing it again, but it's funny because actually this was just in the last week of David Bruce's time at the club, so who I think was maybe pushing these things. It'll be interesting to see if these things carry on and how much the club do these things. But it's been one of the characteristics of this season. I think it's been fantastic.
It has. And if you were to go to AI and say, create an event that would interest Andrew, it would be that. It's I don't even know what any of the events are yet. It's just got a load of words that I'd just love to see. Sunderland culture and business and people and identity and all of that. When I went to the under-21s yesterday, I saw they've started making efforts to put the signage up at the back of the Roker end, and I think that's part of this week. I think ahead of the Forest game, they're going to unveil the Welcome to Sunderland signage. Although how you unveil a sign that we've all seen before, I don't quite know. But we've said before, the club need to make games special. The club need to do something to keep fans engaged. And this looks to be another part of it. And I hope it is something we continue to do when David Bruce has moved on. I just hook it into my veins. Love this type of thing. I'm a sucker for this type of thing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, look, as I said, we'll push for time, so I think that wraps us up. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much to Bomber, Andrew, and Ant. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And thank you again for listening. Look, we're going to have loads of build-up towards the Aston Villa game. We'll start ramping that up now because we'll have loads on the Roker Report website. And, of course, we'll have pods every day leading up to it as usual. So look out for all of that. But from us, it's bye for now.